Hello and здравствуйте. Alright, the rims were painted black and dry brushed with medium grey enamel. I already applied the pigments and used isopropanol as fixer. Because of the dark base color, well, there is no darker one, the rims will only be pin washed and get some dust for the last step when I finish the entire truck. I really wanted to do a hell of a job on the interior of the truck. I wanted to. When I realized that I'll have to close the door in order to place a soldier with the accordion, I immediately lost interest in doing this. The other side of the truck will stand right beside a wall, and what you can see of the interior is next to nothing. I'm not much into doing unnecessary work, so I left it as it is. When you look at a picture of a life this 151, you'll see what these guards really look like. They're not just flat, and they're much thinner than the parts in the kit. I sanded them down to about a third of their thickness. Then I rebuilt the frames from plastic card and thinned them by sanding too. I glue them in place after the wash on cabin and fenders has dried. For me, the chassis is detailed enough. Nobody will ever turn the truck over to take a closer look. Personally, I don't see the point with all those uber-detailed kits. I told you what I think of unnecessary work. What I like most here is that chassis and wheels are black. That creates an unusual contrast and breaks the monotony of a single-color military truck. I masked off the windshields by using simple masking tape and a new pinpointed blade for my X-Acto knife. Then I did the same with the openings for the side windows from the inside and put the cabin on the cabin floor without gluing them together. Last things to mask were the areas on the underside I would need to glue cabin and chassis together. I sprayed the complete subassembly with primer from a rattle can. In some areas I was a bit too generous, I think. Well, we'll see how it turns out in the end. After the primer had dried, I sprayed everything with Tamiya TS62 olive green too. I removed the masking almost immediately when the base color looked dry, because I wanted to keep tape and color from sticking together too well. The grill was just held in place with Revell Contactor Liquid Special. That's not a real glue and can be removed rather easily. The last thing anybody will ever see of the interior, including me, myself and I, are the steps of painting the steering wheel. After that I glued cabin and grille to the cabin floor fender unit, and that was all I did there. One thing I do with every truck I build is putting a towing chain on the front bumper. Here you can see all steps of painting and gluing it to the truck. The amount of decals was excessive. One coat of arms for the guards for both doors. I only painted the doors with gloss coat as I usually do it. After it had dried thoroughly, I applied the decals. The setter was enough to get a good result, because the surface was as even as it could be. Then something very strange happened when I applied the flat coat to seal the decals. I used Revell Enamel Flat Clear that is ready for the airbrush. Somehow it dissolved the paint in some areas. In fact, it would have ruined the paint job if that wasn't a military truck. I'm sure I can use this effect for the weathering process. The assembly of the rails was much easier than I thought. When it was finished, it had a light tendency to get warped, so I put it on the table, placed a heavy book on top and let it cure overnight. Here the substructure was already sprayed with Tamiya TS62. And here it was dry brushed with Revel Matte 65 and washed with a mixture of burnt umber and mineral spirit. My first step is always to prime the figure. Then I paint the skin areas with acrylic sand color for soldiers or men who work mainly outdoors. Women will get a base coat of an acrylic flash color like Tamiya XF15. When the base coat has dried, I apply a wash of burnt or respectively raw sienna and mineral spirit. The wash needs to dry completely. Then I paint the eyes. I begin with black oil and paint the entire eye. Then I use a very light blue for the eyeballs. It looks white, but it isn't. If you could tell it's pale blue, it would be too blue. Last step with the pupil. For this scale I only use black. Then the first oil will be used. It's yellow ochre. I put on tiny patches onto raised areas and then blend them carefully away from creases. I want to maintain the shadows I achieved by using the wash. From now on I use 3 mixes of oils, getting lighter and lighter in value. The first mix consists of yellow ochre, orange and white in about equal parts. I apply it the same way I did with the pure yellow ochre, but the areas where it's used are a little smaller. Next mix is 1 part each of yellow ochre and lemon yellow and 2 parts of white. Again, the areas where it's used are a little smaller than before. The last mix is 1 part each of lemon yellow and orange and about 2.5 parts of white. To some extent it's guesswork because I can't measure the exact amount of each paint. That's why my figures always look a little different from dio to dio. For this step the oils are applied like a dry brushing with enamels. Only the tiniest amount of paint in the bristles. The uniform was painted in Tamiya XF49 khaki. Then a wash of burnt umber and mineral spirit was applied. After it had dried, I dry brushed the uniform with its base color. I show the following steps in my next video. The skirt was base painted with Tamiya XF64 red-brown. Then I painted it with purple red oil, removed most of it again and blended it till it was smooth as silk. I highlighted the raised areas with a lighter red oil and applied shadows with raw umber. The stockings are black oil on Tamiya flesh and then blended till it was translucent enough to show the seams along the calves.